What's going on, everyone? Brian here from Native Instruments. In this installment of How to Use Everything, we're going to be going over the new Kontrol S-Series. We're going to be covering the hardware, the software, and everything in between. With the Kontrol S-Series, you can stay in the flow with an intuitive connection to instruments, effects, your DAW, and directly with Kontakt. Find and control your instruments on a high-res screen and elevate your playing using Polyphonic aftertouch. Let's jump into it. The first thing we'll need to do is download and install Native Access. You can download it by going to ni.de/control-setup, which is also a helpful guide for getting things set up in general. Click on the Native Access link here. Depending on your computer specifications, you can download Native Access for Windows, Macs using Intel chips, or Macs using the M1 or M2 chips. Once you've downloaded and installed Native Access, go ahead and open the program. Either log in using your email and password for your NI account, or if you don't have an account yet, you can create one by clicking Sign Up Now. On the back of the keyboard, we now have two USB-C ports. We'll want to connect the custom USB-C cable into the host port and then plug the other end into the computer. If your computer doesn't have a USB-C port, you'll need to use a USB-C to USB-A adapter. The other port you would use if your computer or USB hub isn't providing enough power to the keyboard. If this is the case, the display will let you know and you can connect an additional USB-C charging cable like you'd have for an iPad. Back in Native Access, in the bottom left, click Add Serial and enter the serial number that's on the card in the box. You can also find the serial number on the underside of the keyboard. It may take a moment, but once the keyboard is registered, all of the products included with the keyboard will appear in Native Access. Next, we'll need to update the hardware via the Hardware Connection service. Click Available at the top, then Applications, and then click Install. This new program is what connects your plugins to your keyboard. We'll now want to make sure that the keyboard is on the latest firmware, so go to ni.de/control-update and download the firmware updater for Mac or Windows. Go ahead and open that program and run the device updater. If your firmware needs to be updated, once it's complete, the keyboard will restart itself. Let's pop back over to Native Access and install additional instruments and effects. Under Available and Application, either install or update to the latest version of Kontakt 7, Reactor 6, and Komplete control software. There's a ton of additional products that come with the S-Series. There's the bundle Komplete 14 Select, IFA, Stradivari Cello, Guitar Rig 7 LE, and the iZotope Elements Suite and Ableton Live Lite. Feel free to pick and choose any additional instruments, effects, and expansions that you would like, or just click the Install All button. The products included in the iZotope Elements Suite bundle are also available for installation via Native Access, like Ozone 11 Elements or Nectar 4 Elements. Just click the Install button for those as well. As I mentioned, you also get a copy of Ableton Live Lite. After registering the keyboard, you should have gotten an email about getting your license for Ableton. Click the link in the email, log in with your native ID, and click Request License. You'll then get a separate email with your license for Ableton Live Lite. Go ahead to Ableton's website and follow those instructions for downloading Live Lite and using the license you received. Now that we've installed all the software that comes with the keyboard, the next thing I want to do is configure my sustain or expression pedal. The S-Series has 4 assignable TRS pedal inputs with a default sustain and expression pedal. By default, the sustain and expression pedal should work, but if you do need to change any of the settings, what you can do is press the settings button here. Now, right now it's set to hardware. Don't worry, we're going to be covering all of these settings as well, but I want to navigate over to pedals, so I'll hit button 2. And now I'm on the pedal setting. Using knob 1, this is where you would select which pedal input you want to configure. Right now it's on the sustain, and all of these settings will be preset for you. So by default, the mode that you would want for a sustain pedal is the switch mode, where the sustain pedal is either on or off. Now, if you press down on the pedal and you realize that the keys are being sustained, you can always invert it by turning this knob here. If you need to adjust any of the additional MIDI settings for your sustain or expression pedal, you can access the other pages using the right arrow. So this is page 2 of 3 and page 3 of 3. Now, if you need to configure your expression pedal, all you would do is just use knob 1 and turn it to expression, and this is where you can adjust those settings. If you need to configure the other 2 additional pedal inputs, you can also use knob 1 and just turn this to assign 1 or assign 2. But again, sustain and expression, these are going to be set up automatically for you, so just plug it in and you'll be good to go. Since Ableton Lite comes with the Kontrol S-Series, we're going to be talking about DAW integration using Ableton. However, the keyboard does integrate with a handful of other DAWs. You can find a full list of the additional DAWs the Kontrol S-Series integrates with and their setup instructions in the description below. Let's get the keyboard configured with Ableton. So with Ableton open, the first thing you want to do is go to Live's Preferences. So I'll click on Live here and go to Settings. Next, we'll click on the Link, Tempo, and MIDI tab. Now that we're in the MIDI setup, the next thing I need to do is add the keyboard to my list of control surfaces. You'll first find an available slot that you have. In my case, I don't have anything in here at the moment, so I'll just use slot number 1. And under Control Surface, you click the drop-down menu, and you will find the Complete Kontrol S Mark III. With that selected, I'll now add the keyboard for the input and output. So clicking the drop-down, you'll see I have 3 different options. There's main, DAW, and external. And what we want to select is DAW, and we'll do the exact same thing for the output. The last thing is enabling the MIDI ports, the inputs for the keyboard. So I'm going to turn on track here, and this basically lets Ableton receive MIDI from the keyboard when I play the keys or turn any of the knobs. With the control surface set up in the MIDI ports, you'll now see that the DAW button is illuminated on the keyboard as well as the transport controls. Unlike the previous versions of the keyboard, if you wanted to take full advantage of the keyboard's features, you would need to load the software Komplete Control. However, with the new Kontrol S-Series, the keyboard integrates directly with Kontakt. So this means you can just load up Kontakt and be able to browse, customize your sound, use the light guide, and create multis all directly from the keyboard. So now with Kontakt on the first MIDI channel, you'll see that on the keyboard, I'm now able to browse through all of my Kontakt instruments. The 8 knobs below let me refine the type of sound that I'm looking for. So with knob 1, I can start filtering by different types of brands. So again, these are not just Native Instruments Kontakt libraries, but any Kontakt library that I have installed on my computer. So first, let's just select Native Instruments. And then knob 2, this is where you can start scrolling through all of the different products within Native Instruments. Now, if you need to scroll down a little bit further, you can actually hold Shift and you can kind of speed scroll through everything. So let's just go back to the top and select the first instrument. Let's choose something from Analog Dreams. With Analog Dreams selected, you can then filter even further. For example, we have the bank selection here. So within Analog Dreams, I can select between Analog Dreams 1.0 or 2.0. I can then further refine the list by choosing a type of sound that I'm looking for, such as bass. I can choose subtypes like synth. And then under character, I can go one level further and choose something like digital as an example. With all of these filters selected, you can actually see what you've chosen at the top here. Everything on the right-hand side, this is your results list. So right now what we're seeing are 8 different presets within Analog Dreams with these filter types selected. To scroll through the presets, you can either use knob 8 here, or you can use the large encoder and scroll through all of the different presets. Now, as I scroll through the presets list, you'll actually hear audio previews of these particular instruments. This is really helpful when you're dealing with large Kontakt libraries. It lets you get an idea of what the sound is without having to actually load it, and this really just saves you time. So if you want to turn on or off the prehear function, all you have to do is hold down Shift and then turn on or off prehear. So I have it turned on right now, and you'll also see there's a little speaker icon letting you know it's enabled. Let's scroll through some of these presets. Now, if there's a particular sound that you like, but maybe it just doesn't fit the project you're working on, you can always set this as a favorite and be able to access it later on. I'll just click the Set Favorite button, and you'll see now that this preset has a little star next to it. I want to go back and basically search for presets across all of my Kontakt libraries. What I can do is hold Shift and hit Reset Filters. This will just reset all of the filters, taking you back to kind of the initial default state when you first loaded Kontakt. Let's say I want to find a preset across all of my Kontakt libraries. I have it currently set to basically all brands and all of my products. From here, I'll start filtering for a particular sound that I'm looking for. We'll first go to Type and select Bass. Next, I can always choose a different subtype, such as, fingered, fretless, synth bass, or I'm just going to go back to just all of the subtypes. And lastly, I'll select character and choose something like tempo synced. Let's scroll through some of the presets and see if we can find that we like. Again, you can either use knob 8 or the large encoder. As I scroll through using the encoder, it's basically going to be going down one preset at a time. You can actually now scroll through by pages by holding Shift and just turning the encoder. All right, that one sounds pretty cool. You can actually see that this preset I had favorited before. Let's take a listen. Now, to load this, all I have to do is just hit the load button, or I can push in on the encoder. If I want to swap out the sound I have loaded, there's a couple different options that I have. I could either press the browser button and kind of refilter and just re-scroll through presets, or you could also use the preset up and down buttons here. If I press next, it's basically going to be going down to the next preset in the list. So I can press it again. So now it's loaded a preset from Output Substance. As I'm scrolling through the presets list, it's still maintaining the same filters that I have selected. So all of the presets that we're listening to still have the bass and tempo synced filter. Now, again, I can go back and hit browser and start changing all sorts of settings. I can look for different products. I can choose, different filtering options here. But if I ever want to go back to the filters I had selected on the current preset that's loaded, what I can actually do is just hold Shift and hit Quick Browse. This will basically recall the exact filter options that I had selected with the current preset. If you're ever changing the filter types or selecting different products and brands, and you just want to get back to the current preset that you have loaded and all of those filtering options, you can just use the Quick Browse option. Touching upon the favorite section again, let's go back and just reset all of the filters. And from here, I'm going to go to Favorites. So right now, this is showing all of my favorited presets across every Kontakt library that I have. If I select an individual library or an individual product and hit Favorites, it's only going to show me favorited presets within that product. So again, these are all of my favorites across these products that I have selected. Let's take a listen to some of my favorited presets. Now that it's loaded, I can start playing the keys. Now that we have an instrument loaded, the next thing you'll probably want to do is customize the sound a little bit just to make it fit your project. So on the keyboard, we have the 8 knobs here, which allow you to customize the sound or the instrument that you have loaded. Right now, the first page is generally the more frequently used parameters you would want to manipulate in order to customize the sound. However, right now, there's also 2 pages of parameters to adjust. So right now, you can see I'm on page 1 of 2. If I hit the right arrow over, I'm now on page 2 of 2. So let's just customize the sound a little bit. Nothing really specific in mind, but just being able to tweak some of the knobs. We've adjusted some of the knobs. It's now kind of this more washed out sound. And one thing that you'll notice is we've updated some of the parameters that you can adjust. Previously, with certain things that were basically an on-off function, we actually have this on-off button, so you actually don't have to turn it that far to enable or disable certain parameters. So no endless scrolling until a parameter is enabled. Now, let's say you've customized the sound and you want to save this for, a future project. What you would do is go into the software and first click the save button here. And this is where you would name your preset. So I can just name this Brian's Ashlight preset, and then just click save. And now it's all set. So to access this from the keyboard, what we would do is go back to the browser area. Right now we're still on favorites, so we'll just disable that and then go to user saved. Now we're in the user saved area, and this list here, these are all of my saved presets that I've created and saved across these products here. Now, if I scrolled over and select something like Playbox, now I'm viewing my own saved presets within inside of Playbox. So when I scroll through these, you're not going to be hearing any audio previews, so you'll just have to load one of them and kind of listen to what it sounds like. One of the powerful things about Kontakt is not just being able to load one instrument, but being able to load multiple instruments simultaneously and create really unique and inspiring layered sounds. I have the Symphony Series string ensemble loaded, and with the Kontrol S-Series, I can actually create multis directly from the keyboard. So what I'll do is click the tab over here, and I have an empty slot. I'll go back to browser, and now I can load another instrument. So I want to create basically a full orchestra just on the keyboard. So I'm going to go over here and select the brass ensemble and just load this first preset. I have two layered instruments. I have the Symphony Series string ensemble and the brass ensemble. When I play the keys, you'll be able to hear the string and the brass libraries being played simultaneously. Let's add one more instrument to this multi. I'll use button 2 to go to the next available slot, press browser, and let's load the woodwind ensemble. Now we have a full orchestra directly on the keyboard. We have the brass, the string, and the woodwinds all at my fingertips. What's unique about creating multis directly from the keyboard is I'm now able to actually control each of the parameters on the 3 different instruments I have loaded. So if I use button 1, I can access the parameters for the brass ensemble or the parameters for the string ensemble, and the light guide changes as well. Now, if you want to remove any of the libraries that you've added to this multi, for example, let's say we want to remove the brass section, I select brass, I just hold shift and hit remove, and now I just have the woodwind ensemble and the string ensemble loaded. Now, if you want to save this, you'll have to go into Kontakt and save this as a multi, but again, you'll have access to this by manually loading it and then having multiple instruments at your fingertips. Let's talk about the light guide. So the light guide on the keyboard visually shows you important information based on the instrument that you have loaded. So let's take Playbox as an example. All of the red keys here, these are basically the notes that I'm able to play, and anything that's blue, I'm not going to be hearing any sound. And the light guide is going to be different depending on what instrument you have loaded. So let's take a orchestral library as an example. I'm going to go back to browser and let's just reset all of the filters. We'll go to brand and we'll choose native instruments, and let's load the Symphony Series library. So again, I can hold shift, scroll through the products a lot faster. And here is the string library. Let's load string ensemble. In this example, the red keys represent the basses, yellow are cellos, viola is green, and lastly, blue are for violins. With this example, the light guide just shows you what instruments are on what sections of each keys. And again, depending on what instrument you have loaded, the light guide is going to give you visual feedback like we saw in Playbox. Let's check out rudiments. In this case, the different colors on the light guide represent the different drum hits in this instrument. So for example, the reds are typically kick drums, yellows are snares, and the other colors could be something like cymbals or just cool sound effects. Now, the section up here, these are for all of the different pre-made patterns within this instrument. So I can just simply hit any one of the purple illuminated keys and we'll hear a pattern using these samples. And you can actually see that the light guide is illuminating the different keys that are being played for those patterns. So I can either trigger pre-made patterns here, or I can just trigger individual drum sounds. With the light guide, now you don't have to aimlessly search for the kick drum. If you can't remember what key it's actually on, the light guide will give you that visual feedback, allowing you to find the sound very quickly. Using the light guide with Kontakt doesn't just work with native instruments libraries. It also works with any third-party Kontakt library or any of our NKS partners that have chosen to take advantage of using the light guide. In addition to being able to load Kontakt libraries, Komplete Kontrol can also load synths, it can also load loops and one-shots from expansions, and you can also take advantage of the play assist features like scales, chord, and art mode. So let's take a look at Komplete Kontrol software. Let's go back into Ableton and just close out of the Kontakt window. And instead of loading Kontakt, this time we're going to find Komplete Kontrol and drag it to the next available slot. You'll notice that the display is very similar browsing in Komplete Kontrol as it was inside of Kontakt. You'll see that I'm able to browse through different brands. I can cycle through and search for different products. And I also have the ability to filter based on sound attributes like type, subbanks, and character. As I mentioned before, Komplete Kontrol allows you to load different synthesizers, not just Kontakt libraries. So if we scroll down, we can find something like Massive X. Within Massive X, I can use the type filter, so I can choose from a wide range of different types of sounds, or I can also just use the character section here and choose something, let's say, deep. As I scroll through the presets, just like we heard in Kontakt, I'm able to hear audio previews of all of these sounds without actually having to load Massive X. I can favorite it just like I was in Kontakt. I can click Set Favorite, and there's a little star there, and let's just load this sound. As I mentioned, you're also able to load loops and one-shots inside of Komplete Kontrol. So let's go back to the browser, and I want to reset all of the filters I currently have selected. So I'll hold Shift, hit Reset Filter, and now I'm back to square one. I'm currently selected on Instruments, and if I hit button 4, I'm now on Loops, or I'm on one-shots. So let's go back to the Loop section. Everything that you see in here, these are all of the loops that I have available from all of the expansions that I have installed on my computer. So if we chose something like, let's say, Motherboard, I can also filter for different types of loops within an expansion, or I can just filter across all of my expansions, letting me find the sound that I want as quickly as possible. With Motherboard selected, I can use the type filter and refine my list of loops based on a type of sound that I want. So let's just choose drums, and now I have 61 results available. So I can use the large encoder and scroll through the different loops and kind of hear what they sound like. One thing that you might have noticed though is as I was scrolling through, the BPM or the speed at all of these loops were playing, they were all identical, even though the BPM that's listed here, all of them were different. One of the great things about browsing and previewing the loops inside of Komplete Kontrol is they're all going to be tempo synced. So if you're scrolling through different loops and trying to find one that fits your project, you're actually going to be listening to them in the same tempo as your project. So you're not listening to loops that are just way too fast and out of context. So it's a lot easier for you to decide, will this loop work with my project or won't it? Let's load this loop here. So I'll push in the encoder. And now the loop is loaded into Komplete Kontrol's audio engine. I can play it back on the keys using the keyboard. In the default mode with the audio engine, playing different keys is just going to be repitching the loop, but the tempo is still going to be matched to your project's BPM. I have additional settings that I can customize, such as just retuning the loop. If I need to increase or decrease the tempo of the loop or change its length, I can use the tempo and the length knobs here. I also have different modes such as stretch, formant, or repitch. So there's a lot of ways for you to customize how this loop is going to be played back inside of Komplete Kontrol. That was loading a loop inside of Komplete Kontrol. Let's take a look at using a one-shot inside of the software. I'm currently on loop, so I'll tab over to the one-shot section. And now these are all of the expansions, all of the one-shots that I have access to. I can use the encoder and find a one-shot that I want. Let's just listen to the first few. I'll push in the encoder to load it. I have the one-shot loaded in Komplete Kontrol Sampler, and there's multiple pages of parameters that I can use to adjust the sound. For example, I can go over to page 2 and change the type of playback from a one-shot to ADSR. Now if I hold down multiple keys at once, they'll play as long as I'm actually pressing the keys. Again, there's tons of pages to go through. There's 6 in total for the sampler. There's effects that you can adjust. There's envelope adjustments as well. So load a one-shot, go through some of the pages, tweak it, and customize it to fit your project. I have the one-shot loaded, and it's a pretty basic sound, and I want to customize it a little bit more, just make it more exciting. And to do that, I'll start loading some effects directly from the keyboard. I'll hit button 2, and now I'm able to load an effect directly inside of Komplete Kontrol. I'll go back to browser, and all of the products that you see here, these are all of the effects that I have available to load inside of Komplete Kontrol. All of the native instruments effects can be loaded and browsed directly from the keyboard, as well as NKS effects. I want to load 2 effects to make this sound a little bit more exciting. So I'll use knob 2 and select Dirt, which is a great distortion effect. And since these are just effects, I'm not going to be hearing any audio previews, so we can just load one and see what it sounds like. Sounds pretty good. Let's load one more effect. Let's load a reverb such as ROM. I'll hit button 2, go over to the next available slot, browser, and scroll down until I find ROM. There we go. And let's load one more here. What you can also do is rearrange the order of effects that you have in Komplete Kontrol. The order that you have certain effects is going to affect the way that the sound sounds. Right now we have Dirt and then ROM, and this is what it sounds like. Let's swap the order of them. What I'll do is I'll hold Shift, and let's move ROM over first. So now the order is the sampler, the one shot, then I have ROM, and then we have Dirt. You can now hear how the distortion is affecting the reverb as opposed to the reverb affecting the distortion. If you want to remove any of the effects, let's say we want to remove dirt, I can just hold Shift and either bypass the effect altogether, or I can remove it. Any of the effects that you load, these can be added onto one-shots, loops, and all of your instruments, whether it be Kontakt libraries, Reactor instruments, or NKS instruments as well. An amazing feature that allows you to play your instruments in a way more expressive way is Polyphonic Aftertouch. Polyphonic Aftertouch comes standard on all three versions of the Kontrol S-Series, the 49, 61, and the 88. Aftertouch has been around for a while, but with Polyphonic Aftertouch, you can apply pressure to individual keys, and whatever the aftertouch is mapped to, it's only going to be applied to that single key. So let's just stop talking about it and show you how it works. I currently have Fables loaded, which supports Polyphonic Aftertouch. If I play a simple chord in the left hand, you can hear the basic chord. Now I'll play the same chord again and add a single note at the top and then start applying pressure only to that note. And you'll hear how only that note is being affected. It's a very weird sound, but I use this as an example to really let you hear how Polyphonic Aftertouch works. In the software here, inside of Fables, if I click this icon here, you'll see I have a whole Aftertouch area, which allows me to change certain functions and how Polyphonic Aftertouch is going to affect the sound. So I can change something like the proximity, we'll lower the volume, let's just open up the filter, open up the resonance, and let's change the pitch up and just make it something really dramatic. So again, you can hear the chord I'm playing in my left hand stays the same. I'm not applying additional pressure, so the sound really isn't changing, but the individual note that I applied pressure to, that's what was really being affected. Let's take a look at a couple other examples of Polyphonic Aftertouch with different types of instruments. One thing I do want to point out is Polyphonic Aftertouch is really dependent on the instrument that you're using. Not every Kontakt library or synth out there supports Polyphonic Aftertouch. So for example, Fables does, and also Diva by Yuhi supports the Polyphonic Aftertouch. Let's take a listen to this one. You can hear with this, the individual notes I was playing in the right hand was adding a little bit of vibrato, but the notes in the left hand pretty much stayed the same. As another example, I have Ableton's Wavetable synth loaded, and with the Polyphonic Aftertouch, as I apply pressure to individual notes, it's going to be cycling through the different waveforms and affecting the sound. And when this is recorded as automation inside of Ableton, you can actually change the amount of pressure that you've applied to individual notes to further refine how it sounds. Every instrument that supports Polyphonic Aftertouch is going to be using it in a different manner. For example, with orchestral tools Time Macro or Time Micro, as I apply pressure to individual notes, it's actually going to be blending between different sounds. With this example I have loaded, by applying light pressure, you're going to be hearing a men's choir sustained, but as I start applying more pressure to the notes, lower strings are going to start entering into the mix. As you can see, the possibilities are endless when using Polyphonic Aftertouch. It really just depends on the instrument that you have loaded and if it supports Polyphonic Aftertouch or not. It's great to think that imagine having an orchestra at your fingertips, and as you start applying more pressure to the keys, the dynamics are changing. So this really just adds an additional layer of expressiveness when you're using the keyboard. In addition to all of the hardware and software upgrades that have been made with the Kontrol S-Series, there's also some improvements that have been made with NKS, or what we call next-gen NKS. A lot of the improvements are for instrument builders and developers, making integrating their products with the keyboard much more seamless. But as a user of a keyboard, there's improvements that have been made to allow you to find and customize your sound much more easily than previous versions of NKS instruments. Let's take a look at some of our NKS partners that have updated to the next-gen NKS. I have a new instance of Complete Control loaded, and I want to start filtering by brands first. So I'm going to go and select Arturia, and let's load CS80. And we'll just load one of the presets here. For those of you who are familiar with Arturia CS80, you'll know there's a lot of parameters to adjust. Right now, we're just seeing only 8 that we can adjust. With the next-gen NKS, we have this edit button here. All of the parameters have been conveniently grouped together based off of their functions. For example, we have the master level, voltage control oscillators, filters, amp envelopes, modulation, and we have 4 tabs, so I can do sub-oscillators, ring modulator, arpeggiators, macros, effects 1 and 2. So now everything is grouped together, making it a lot easier to find the parameter that you're looking for. Let's say I want to adjust some of the filter settings. I can go over to VCF here, and now I can see the high-pass filter, low-pass filters. I also have 3 pages worth of filter adjustments. So I can also then go over to a different tab here. Let's say I want to go to the ring modulator effect. If I just change it here. So with ring modulator, I have page 1 of 1, but if I choose something else, let's say effects 1, there are 17 pages worth of parameters to adjust within this effects 1 category. Another great thing with next-gen NKS is previously when you were using the left and the right arrow, you were always tabbing over by groups of 8. What happens if you want to see the 8th parameter and the 9th parameter simultaneously? Any instruments that have been updated to the next-gen NKS, if you hold shift and hit the left or the right arrow button, everything actually just shifts over by 1 value. So now I'm able to see size and the next parameter here. If you're familiar or more comfortable with the classic view when controlling your sound, you can always hold down Shift and click on Classic View, and this will bring up the parameter mapping that you would be used to if you were using a Mark II keyboard. But for myself, the new edit function and how everything is grouped together, it makes finding the parameters I want very easy and just more accessible. Built into the Complete Control software are these great functions called Play Assist, previously known as the Smart Play features. This included functions such as Scales mode, Chords mode, and the ARP mode. Let's take a look at the Scales mode first. To access the Scales, Chords, and ARP mode, first what you'll do is press the Play Assist button here. Next, to activate the parameters for Scale mode, I'll press button 1, and to activate it, you hold Shift and hit button 1, and you'll see that there's a blue dot here activating Scale mode. You'll also notice that the light guide has changed, and this basically tells you what notes are and aren't in the scale. You can choose from a wide variety of different scales, scale banks, and basically this allows you to not play a wrong note. If you want to change any of the scales, what you would do is use the knobs here, and you can choose from, again, a wide range of different scale banks. Let's just choose something like main. And for type, you can choose common scale types like harmonic minor, minor pentatonic, blues scales, and so on. So let's just choose harmonic minor, and the root note in this case is C. On the light guide, any of the keys that are illuminated basically say that these notes are in the scale of C harmonic minor. Now in mapped mode, any key that's not illuminated or not in the scale, Complete Control is automatically going to adjust that note higher or lower, so you're never playing a wrong note. As an example, if I play any of the keys on the piano, if I'm playing black, white keys, it's all going to be in the same scale of C harmonic minor. Making it very easy to play any type of scale that you want. Now, there's different types of key modes. What we're on now is mapped mode, but you can also choose something like guide mode, where the light guide will just visually show you what notes are and aren't in the scale. However, if you play one of the notes that aren't in the scale, you're going to hear the actual pitch of that note. So this is a great tool for you to use if you're trying to learn different scales. You can also choose something like easy mode. All you have to do is just play the white keys and it's going to play whatever scale you have selected. Lastly, in learn mode, it's very similar to the guided mode. However, if you play a note that's not in the scale, for example, C sharp, you're actually not going to hear anything. So again, this is a great way for you to learn different scales on the piano. Let's change this back to mapped mode. And next is chord mode. In chord mode, you're able to play different types of chords with a single key. Currently it's off, and let's choose harmonizer mode first. In harmonizer mode, you can play different types of chords like 1-3-5s, 1-4-5s, 7ths, and so on. And the chord that I'm playing is based upon the scale that I have selected. So if I choose something else like a major pentatonic scale, the chords are going to be different. You can also change the different types of inversions with the chords. Right now it's in root. I can do first inversion, second inversion, or third, which is back basically to the root position. So let's just change this back to root. And the last type of chord mode is the chord sets. In chord set mode, these are different types of chord progressions that you can just play individual keys in sequential order and it will play back common chord progressions, or you can just jump around and find something different. Let's select one of the different chord sets. We'll choose minor 3 and listen to how this sounds. Sounds a little familiar. Let's choose one other. Let's do major 7. Pretty simple. So that's scale and chord mode. Lastly, let's talk about art mode. Now, to enable art mode, I'm just going to select button 2 to select the parameter adjustments for that. And just like scale, I'll hold shift, hit button 2, and now ARP mode is enabled. So ARP mode, or the arpeggiator, you can just play a single key or play a chord and the keyboard's going to arpeggiate the notes. Now, what's pretty cool is I have the chord set mode enabled and I have the arpeggiator mode on. So by holding a single note, it's going to arpeggiate the chord set. Using the 8 knobs, you can adjust how the arpeggiator is functioning. For right now, I have the 16th note rate selected. I can just use the knob and change it to something else, like an 8th note. You can have it select different octaves, different dynamics. There's also a second page of additional parameters you can adjust. But one of the functions that I love using are these preset arpeggiator rate slots at the top. By simply pressing any of these here, it's going to automatically change the arpeggiator rate. And if you want to change any of the rates in any of the slots, all you have to do is just select it here, change the arpeggiator rate from down below, and you can see that that rate has now changed. So it's a great way to get creative. Honestly, you could load a one-shot hi-hat and actually use the arpeggiator to create some cool hi-hat rolls, or, just use it for a wide range of different functions. While being able to control your sound directly from the keyboard is great, being able to control the key important functions inside of your DAW is even better. With the Complete Kontrol S-Series, the keyboard integrates directly with a wide range of DAWs such as Ableton, Logic, Cubase, Pro Tools, and FL Studio, and many more. So let's take a look how to really utilize the keyboard and how to integrate it with your DAW. In plugin mode, I'm able to basically control the plugin that I have loaded. Now, if I select DAW, this brings up the mixer page. On DAW mode, I'm able to see all of the different tracks and how I have them labeled. So Alicia's Keys is currently selected, and as I play something, you can see the volume adjust on the keyboard. Using the knobs below, I'm able to decrease or increase the volume of the selected channel. If you want to do some fine adjustment, you can hold Shift and also use the encoder, and it's basically moving it in smaller increments. The buttons at the top allow you to mute or unmute certain tracks inside of Ableton or your DAW, and by holding Shift, this allows you to solo a selected channel. I can also adjust the pan settings of each individual track by holding Shift and clicking up on the encoder, and now I can pan certain things to the left or to the right. So let's get back to the mixer section. The encoder on the right, I can rotate it, but I can also click it left and right to start navigating to the different tracks in my project. Now, if I have a track that's selected that doesn't have Complete Kontrol or Kontakt loaded, you'll notice that the plugin button is not illuminated. Now, if I select a track that has either Kontakt or Complete Kontrol loaded, you'll see plugin is illuminated. I press it, and now I'm able to control that instrument that's selected. If I have plugin mode open and I scroll left and right, it's also going to automatically just pull up the instrument that I have selected. If I choose the non-Kontakt or Complete Kontrol track, it's just going to be in the default MIDI template. Or if I click right, now I'm back on Fables inside of Kontakt. In addition to being able to adjust the volume and pan settings, mute and solo, you also have dedicated buttons for the key functions inside of your DAW, such as transport control, undo, redo, being able to enable automation, turn on and off your metronome, and quantize your notes. So let's just record something really quickly and kind of show you how those functions work. So first, I'll just hit the metronome button, which enables the metronome inside of Ableton. If you hold Shift and tap the metronome button, this is basically going to adjust the project's BPM based on the rate that you tapped at, but I'm just going to leave the default 120 on. And to record something, I'll just hit the record button. It's going to give me a 1-bar count in. I'll play something, and when I'm done, I'll just hit stop. Let's take a listen to how on beat I played the chords. So to play back from the beginning, I'll just hold Shift and hit play for restart. So it's not perfectly lined up with the grid. So what I can actually do is just hit the quantize button here. By pressing quantize, it's going to quantize all of the notes to 100%. Or let's say I want to undo the quantize. I can hold Shift and hit quantize, and it's going to quantize everything by 50%. So if you're quantizing some drums and you want to maintain some of the human feel to it, maybe look into quantizing stuff by 50% instead of 100%. So I'll just hit undo, hit quantize, so everything is locked perfectly to the grid. And now let's take a listen. Sounds good to me. Now, lastly, I want to add some automation, and I want to, let's say, increase the amount of reverb that's applied as I'm playing this chord progression. And the reverb, I'll use the one that's built into Alicia's Keys. To record automation directly from the keyboard, we're going to start from the very beginning. And the first thing you want to do is make sure that the auto or the automation button is illuminated. I'll hit record again, tweak some knobs, and the parameter changes will be recorded as automation inside of Ableton. So I actually want this pattern to loop. So what I'll do is I'll hit the loop button, And you can see in the software my loop start and end point. It's a little bit off. So what I can actually do is hold down loop and use the encoder, and it's going to slide the start and the end point of my loop over. So let's just take a final listen and listen to the automation. Previously, if you wanted to adjust any of the settings directly related to the keyboard, you had to do that inside of the software. With the new Kontrol S-Series, a lot of the hardware settings can be adjusted directly from the keyboard. Let's just go through some of the pages in the settings area. So first, I'll press the settings button on the keyboard, and right now we're on the hardware tab. So from here, I can adjust certain things like the brightness of the LEDs, which basically mean the brightness of the light guide here, all of the LEDs that you see on the encoder, the mod wheel, and the pitch wheel. You can also adjust the display brightness, but you can also turn on and off the light guide if you want to. And by default, you can also change the color of the light guide, the encoder, and the pitch and mod wheel. Currently I have it set to orange, but I can cycle through a wide range of different colors to fit the vibe of your studio or however you're feeling during that day. There's also 2 pages worth of hardware settings. This is page 1. And from here on page 2, we have something interesting, MIDI 2.0. The Kontrol S-Series does support MIDI 2.0. However, MIDI 2.0 isn't widely adopted just yet. So when more companies start utilizing the MIDI 2.0 functionality, the Kontrol S-Series will be able to support that. So for right now, you can just set this to MIDI 1.0. However, you'll just need to reboot the keyboard in order to activate it into MIDI 1.0. Let's go over to the next tab, and this is the key bed. So this is where you're going to adjust the velocity curve of the key bed, and where you're also going to be able to adjust the aftertouch settings. If you want to just completely disable aftertouch, you can do that here. You can also set this to monophonic aftertouch or polyphonic aftertouch. The next tab over, pedals, this is something that we covered previously, but again, the pedals area, this is where you're going to be configuring the assignable TRS pedal inputs on the back. I currently have sustain selected, but you can select the expression input and the 3rd and 4th assignable pedal inputs. Next, if we go over here, this is the touch strip settings. So on the left here, this is where you would configure basically everything the touch strip could do. Now, you'll notice though, with pedals and expression, the MIDI here is also set to channel 1, number 11. Same thing with the touch strip. So if you want to have expression when you're playing a certain instrument, if you have an expression pedal, you could do that. Or if you don't, you can always use the touch strip here for the additional level of expression. The next tab over, this is where you would adjust the pitch and the mod wheel. Currently, these are the settings for the pitch bend wheel, but if you click the right arrow over here, this is where you're going to adjust settings for the modulation wheel. That just about covers everything you need to know about the new Kontrol S-Series. For more information, you can find a link for the manual in the description below, as well as additional resources. Thanks for watching.